Hi everyone, I'm really glad to see so many of you. We've had some awesome speakers today. We started with Magnus this morning talking about tapping and meditation. Just wanted to do a quick check to see how many people have actually heard of tapping. Okay, most of you have heard of it. How many of you have tried it? Okay, a few less. Okay, so the way that I tap is a little bit different. I'm going to show you some techniques that you can use in the field, so to speak, that you can use on the tube while you're on the phone, if you're waiting for a job interview, anything where you're getting a little bit nervous, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce myself, I'll give you a little bit of background, and then I'll take you through some history of tapping, and then we're going to show you how to actually do some tapping on yourself. So I have a background in complementary therapies. I studied Reiki, massage. In 2004, I came across tapping. I went to a talk very similar to this, and I tried it, and I thought, wow, that sounds great. Then I actually saw a therapist, had a couple of tapping sessions, and I found it literally life-changing. I was dealing with getting over a divorce, and I found that a couple of tapping sessions helped me release a lot of that trauma that I'd had. And then I thought, wow, I have to learn how to do this. I have to train. So I trained, and here we are. 3 or 4 years later, here we are. So one of the areas that I focus on mainly with clients is helping them with performance, helping them with issues where they have public speaking issues, where they have any kind of issues with, like, even if they're professional singers, sports people, and also I help people with confidence in general. As we've heard a few people say today, like if somebody has said something to you years ago, you've kind of downloaded that thing, so you might think, I'm no good at public speaking, or I'm no good at maths, or I can't draw. All those things are limiting beliefs that we all work on with tapping. So one of the things that happens, for example, if somebody has a public speaking phobia, is that the brain's primitive alarm system will kick in. So this is the alarm system that if an animal is being chased in the wild, it knows it's in danger, so the body goes into fight, flight, or freeze. So what's happening is that a lot of the blood will go to the muscles, a lot of adrenaline's released, cortisol's released, and either the animal runs, or it fights, or it freezes. So if you're late for a job interview and all of a sudden you're stuck in traffic, that same reaction happens in your brain. Only those chemicals have got nowhere to go because you're stuck in your car, unless you actually get out and beat the person up who's like in front of you, which has happened. So tapping is a way of releasing that, calming that primitive bit of the brain, the amygdala, where all those stress responses are produced. And they've actually done some studies measuring the cortisol level in the saliva actually after tapping, and within minutes it goes down by about 20%, so it's quite significant. The other thing that happens is when people tap is that serotonin's released into the brain, which are like your feel-good chemical, so it's a good way of like relaxing you really, really quickly. So I'll tell you a little bit about the history of tapping very briefly. It was discovered by a clinical psychologist who was working with a woman with a water phobia, severe water phobia. If she went anywhere near water, her fight or flight system would kick in massively, and she hadn't apparently had a bath for very long. She was terrified. He couldn't work out what the cause of this trauma was, and he'd had like several sessions with her, and no progress had been made. Then one day he asked her, "Where do you feel that fear in your body?" And she said, "I feel it in my stomach." And he'd been studying acupuncture and acupressure. And he got a brainwave and thought, why don't I get her to tap just on this point here, which is with the stomach meridian. In traditional Chinese medicine, each meridian energy line is associated with an organ as well as an emotion. The organ is the stomach, the emotion is fear. He got her to tap there, and all of a sudden she said, it's gone. She went outside, there was a swimming pool, she started running over to the swimming pool, and he was like, Mary, remember you can't swim. And she started splashing water on her face. Now that's an amazing like story, and we call this in the tapping world, we call this a 1 minute wonder, because it doesn't always happen like that, but it can happen very, very quickly. So what had happened is her association in the brain with water equals mortal danger. Somehow that association had been broken, that neural pathway had been kind of cleared in a way by tapping. So this is just awesome, right? So now there are a lot of different uses for tapping. There are the way where you could talk and you say, even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself. There is different styles of tapping. My style tends to be more, I just tap, because normally whatever happens is your feelings are tuned in. Whether you're saying the words or not, your feelings are already tuned in. If you're on a crowded tube, for example, and you don't feel very comfortable, all those feelings are tuned in. So the thing I'm going to show you is how to do some tapping in any situation and we're not going to be doing a lot of this kind of tapping, because not many people will want to do this on the tube, although I sometimes do. So I'm going to show you some techniques of how to do some tapping without that many people noticing what you're actually doing. So there's several points that you can use where nobody would really know what you're doing. So the collarbone point that Magnus showed you this morning, which is just underneath the collarbone. If you want to try just finding it, there's a point there, it's like a little hollow just under the collarbone. So you can tap that point, or you can also just rub it, or just hold it. So that's a really nice way of just kind of calming yourself down without anybody really noticing what you're doing necessarily. The other way that you can tap is there's a lot of finger points, which Magnus showed you this morning. There is a way of tapping where you use the thumb of the same hand. If you want to try this with your dominant hand, the thumb of the same hand, and then you tap on the point of the next finger down, and the next finger down, and the next one down, and the next one down, and then you go back up again. And you could be talking to somebody. Hi, Magnus. You could be talking to somebody on the phone and do this, especially if, like Alex talked about this morning, if you have some a bit of charge with that person, if you're having a bit of a difficult situation with that person, tapping like this while you can add it to your everyday life. So you could add it while you're having that conversation with that person. You can do some tapping while you're on the phone, right? You can do some tapping in the loo before your job interview. There are lots of ways you can use it. What else did I want to tell you? There are some amazing uses of tapping now where people are going to places where there's been severe traumas. There's an amazing charity that go to Rwanda and help victims of the genocide there, and they do group tapping together, and they're finding that the trauma, the collective trauma, is going down. So they're teaching orphans and victims of the genocides to go out there and then teach other people how to tap, and it's spreading. Two colleagues from the States and from Australia have just been to the Philippines and have done another project with people after the last disaster. So there's some really interesting uses of tapping now. A lot of people, sports people, are actually using tapping too. Like, I would love to work with Andy Murray. I think he could do with a little bit of a tapping session. Because I think very often what happens is, like, sports people have to stay in the moment, and that's a really, really tricky thing, especially when you have a lot of past, like, trauma, like stroke, public humiliation, which can be quite crippling. And especially having the whole disapproval or approval of the whole nation hanging on how well you do as well is obviously a major thing. What else? Oh, I'm still tapping, by the way. what else do I want to tell you? So there are, does anybody have any situations that they would like to try some tapping on? Any situations where they feel particularly stressed, like in their lives? Any issues that they've had where they felt quite stressed and where perhaps they would like to get a bit more clarity and presence? Yeah.
This could help me, but sometimes I feel when I'm among certain people, I feel sort of inadequate to those type of people. You know, people I've worked with, I feel almost like what I have to say isn't of value, and I should only be kind of listened to.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's your like, it's a bit of your belief, right? What's happening there is that you have this belief that perhaps you're not in quite the same league as those people, right? And that belief, your brain has actually formed that belief because it's trying to keep you safe, right? The idea of like public, the feeling that you might make a fool of yourself in public, this goes for everybody in the whole wide world, is such a strong feeling because it links back to tribal, like the tribal system, where if you made a major mistake, you were out. And then that would be, you could starve, right? So those things, that belief that you actually got there is actually trying to keep you safe. So the first thing to do there is to actually try and accept. Thank your subconscious and say, thank you so much for trying to keep me safe, because that's what it's trying to do, right? And then the next step is to actually get, because what's happening is the subconscious brain isn't that, like logically you know, right? You know that it's not actually the case, right? That you have valid things to say, but that bit of you that's trying to keep you safe is saying, oh no, don't do it. So there are ways of just tapping on that. And there is a way of, as you're thinking about that situation now, like you're there with those people, right? You don't quite know what you want to say. Like maybe you shouldn't. Is there a feeling in your body as you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it kind of just crossed my chest.
Okay. And how does it feel?
It's almost like anxiety, so it's kind of also restricted sort of.
Does it feel? It feels tight.
Yeah.
Okay, it feels tight, and does it feel hot or cold?
Not necessarily.
Okay, so you've got this tightness in your chest as you're thinking about it. So that's one way you could tap. We just like Alex was talking about this morning, the first step is to actually just accept like that feeling and just do some tapping. You could just tap through the points. I mean, everybody can just tap along to the eyebrow point here. You just do that now, actually. Just tap along with me and just focus on that feeling in your chest and don't try and change it at all. So you've got this tightness in your chest. And then go to the eyebrow point, the side of the eye point. And then under your eye. And just keep just focusing on that feeling. Everybody take a breath. Okay, now under the nose. A chin point. And the collarbone point. Take a nice easy breath. Alright, and just focusing and back that area of your body. How does it feel? It feels more relaxed.
If I'm thinking about the situation that it's made a specific situation.
Yes, absolutely. So that's really nice. Just you see, like in a few seconds, by just adding the tapping to your, basically you're adding the tapping to your awareness, right? That's what you're doing. And you can do that with anything. You can do that with a feeling, like you have a physical feeling. You could do it with an ache or a pain. Then you could also ask that feeling, if you have a physical symptom, for example, like you have a pain in your knee, you could do this a very similar thing. You could ask that feeling in your knee, what are you trying to say? What's your message? And something might come to you, right? Or you might feel like, you might have a pain in your knee and it might feel like hot. So then you can ask yourself, what would be the emotion associated with it? And something might come up. It might be like frustration. And like all these things, your subconscious and your brain knows everything, right? And it's just a way of asking without too much pressure. Things will pop into your mind, and then you can just work with all that stuff. And it is quite incredible how it works. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, awesome. Anybody have anything else? Have anything? Yeah.
It's not about having anything, but in the beginning, he was basically talking as he was doing it, but you're doing it without talking. Does that map?
No, basically what's happening is like whenever anything's happening, like your feelings and thoughts of what's going on in your life is tuned in, okay? So you could have your attention on a tightness in your chest. You could just have your attention on it. Or you could be saying this tightness in my chest. Are you with me? It doesn't actually, for the brain, it doesn't actually make any difference because you're adding that relaxation, that smoothing of your system, adding it to the feeling.
So you don't really need to say anything?
You don't need to say anything. No, that's a really good point. Thank you. Yeah, so you don't have to say anything. The other way you can tap is just as you're walking down the road, you can just tap and tap and tap on any points without consciously thinking of anything, because most of your issues are tuned in the whole time anyway. So that's another way of tapping where you can just tone your energy system as you're going about your daily business without concentrating on any particular feeling. One of the things that happens with traditional EFT, sometimes people get stuck on the words. They say, well, yeah, but I don't know what to say. I don't know what the words are. So this is actually a really good way of adding the tapping to your daily routine, and you'll find it smooths your system out, and it just it makes you more relaxed. Like when I get into a proper tapping session, I start yawning just like Deborah's doing there. And what's actually happening is like when I tap a lot, Magnus can testify to this. When I tap a lot, I start yawning and my eyes start watering because I get so relaxed. I have so much serotonin going, being produced in my brain. It's just, so it's a really awesome way of like chilling out without having to take any pills, basically. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up? Wait, 2 people. Okay, boom.
So at the beginning, you had a story about the pain in the stomach.
Yes.
In the head.
Yes.
So is there any way to a specific place to tap, and how do you find out about it depending on where?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. So the stomach meridian, this point here under the eye, is really, really good for anything where you have fears, okay? And there is another point under the eye, under the nose here, this one, the embarrassment and shame. However, the thing that's been found to work is if you find 4 or 5 points that work for you, that you like, you can just tap them in any order, and it tends to work. Like the collarbone point for a lot of people is really nice. There's also a bonus point, which is just above the wrist crease here, which I find really relaxing. There are 3 meridians running through there, including the heart meridian. So that's a really nice soothing point. And the way to tap is you don't have to tap very hard. You just have to be able to feel it. You don't have to poke yourself too hard. I've got some cards on the table with all the tapping points on, so feel free to take those, all of you. And then, the other thing I wanted to say was that the feeling, like the feeling you were talking about, this woman had like a fear, and she could feel that fear like in her stomach, okay? So there is definitely association, different areas of the body. We all know that feeling of like the tightness in the chest. The like, you know, sometimes you get really, really stressed. I know when I've been studying a lot, I've had this, where all of a sudden your brain is just, you can't think properly, right? And what's happening there is that a lot of the blood goes out of your frontal cortex into the bit of your body that will help you run away, right? So when you're the most stressed, your creative thinking goes completely out the window. So tapping is a really awesome way of like trying to just regulate all that so you can be more present and more clear. So yeah, anybody else have any? Yes?
Just a practical question.
Yes.
I notice you only tap on one side of your body.
Yeah.
Is it significant?
It's just because I'm holding a phone with the other hand. You can tap either side, both sides. So there's a central meridian that runs through, which is why we only have, you only have one under the nose, right? But you've got two eyes, two eyebrows. So the hands, it's whatever works for you. You can, as Magnus said this morning, you can tap both sides, either side. It's...
What if you do it simultaneously? Is it
Go for it. Be my guest. Knock yourself out. Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.